Hello everyone and welcome to Split Second. My name is Cicada and I'll be taking you through today's match. Before starting, we at Split Second want to thank everyone for your constant support and suggestions on all social media. You can continue to support us by sharing and liking this video, subscribing if you haven't yet, by becoming a patron, or simply by not skipping the ads on our videos. This week we have Thassa Deep Dwelling, a personal brew, Luigi with the combat-centric Reanimator Kenrith, David with Wardav 16s and Sinestra's Twister Loop Keenan, and Bal with his vision for Relentless Rats Jarrett. Bal won the role this week. He mulliganed once and kept a hand with 3 lands, Gaia's Cradle for tons of mana, Woodland Cemetery and a Swamp. He has a Mana Vault, Birds of Paradise and 2 Relentless Rats. Right now he lacks a way to pressure the board, being mostly filled with mana. I also had to mulligan once and kept a hand with, well, tons of mana. 2 islands and a blast zone followed by a Chrome Mox. I do have some interaction in the shape of Blink of an Eye, Muddle the Mixture and the trusty Flustered Storm. Luigi mulliganed once and it's a doozy. He has Wooded Foothills and Reflecting Pool for lands. Noble Hierarch can help him cover more ground in terms of colored mana. He has a sneak attack to try and abuse his Elesh Norn and Medomai, while Silverblade Paladin can be paired with Medomai for 2 extra turns in a single combat. Finally, David also had to mulligan once and kept a mana-centric hand, similar to mine and Bal's. Yavimaya Coast, Snow Island and Cephalid Coliseum with a Swan Song for interaction, Carpet of Flowers, a Chrome Mox and a Seedborn Muse. He lacks tutors, but if he decides to play an early Keenan, he can maybe look for a way to get a Prophet of Distortion and draw some with that Yavimaya Coast. Time to give this match a spin. Bal starts simple, with a Swamp and a Mana Vault. What's 5 mana on turn 2, right? I play slower with an island into passing the turn while fighting all over the Chrome Mox in my hand and the lack of something to pitch. Luigi plays and cracks Wooded Foothills, getting himself a Taiga. With it, he casts Noble Hierarch. Pretty decent ramp. He passes. Similar to me, David goes for a slow game of Snow Island into passing, not really seeing a reason to exile anything to his Chrome Mox for a no payoffs Keenan. Bal does have a bunch of mana, but he decides to go for a Woodland Cemetery and a Birds of Paradise rather than some of his squeakier creatures. I play a Blast Zone since everyone is going for 1 CMC permanent. I pass the turn. Luigi plays a Reflecting Pool. He has nothing to cast, passing the turn. David gets a Snow Forest in and he does not shy away from his Carpet. He passes to Bal, keeping mana open for interaction. Bal plays his first Relentless Rats. He then plays a tapped Overgrown Tomb, ready to start some scratching next turn. I play an island and, after some thinking, play Chrome Mox while pitching in a Transmute Artifact. I don't want to give David a billion mana, so I cast the self-explanatory Steel Enchantment on his Carpet. David tries to give me a bird token with Swan Song, which I politely refuse with Flusterstorm. The Carpet is now mine, and I pass. Luigi plays a Windswept Heath, cracking it for a plateau. He then mocks the Steel Enchantment War by casting Sneak Attack. Oh boy. David plays Yavimaya Coast and passes fully untapped. Bal plays Gaia's Cradle and then a second Relentless Rats. He participates in our terror of Luigi's next turn by throwing a rat at him before passing. I add 1 blue mana with the Carpet and play one of my pet utility lands, Scavenging Grounds. I cast my commander, Thassa, and pass the turn to Luigi, not sure what is going to happen. Luigi cracks his knuckles. He uses his sneak attack to play a Mind Leech Mass followed by a Medomai and a Silverblade Paladin, binding it to Medomai. So basically, he's threatening 2 extra turns and stealing a spell from someone's hand. The Leech and the Paladin go for my face just because he doesn't want Bal's rats and he's not sure whether David has something besides counter magic. Medomai goes for Bal since he's the one most likely to fill the board. David Cyclonic Rifts Medomai to avoid Luigi getting 2 extra turns, while I cast Blink of an Eye since that was the best spell I had available anyway, and this would let Luigi bounce back one of his creatures. Mind Leech Mass and Medomai get Time Walked back to Luigi's sad hand. I get struck by the Paladin, which is sacrificed on Luigi's end step. David plays the Wooded Foothills and plays the Mirage Mirror. For now, he doesn't have super good targets for it, but he can always defend himself from some of Luigi's shenanigans. We're back to Bal's turn. He plays a Twilight Mire and then splits his attacks onto Luigi and David, pressuring 2 decks that can outrace his in different scenarios. He passes afterwards untapped. On my turn, I cast a Sky Diamond and don the Selflessness hat and cast Venser Shaper Savant onto Luis's sneak attack so that he slows down a bit. I move to my end step and, because I know if Luis gets a land he can just cast the sneak attack and get something like Medomai out, I use Thassa on Venser to bounce Luis's Noble Hierarch as well. Threats temporarily diffused. Thassa also becomes a creature as a bonus. Luis goes to his turn and misses a land drop. He recasts the Hierarch and is forced to go to end step. David takes this opportunity to crack his fetch for a Snow Forest, not fitting my carpet. So rude. On his turn, he plays a Cephalid Colosseum and follows that with a Seedborn Muse. On his next turn cycle, he can potentially get Kinnan and start digging. Bal plays a Swamp and casts the third Relentless Rats, while following that up with Jared. His board is steadily becoming a threat, and he punches that by casting a Grey Merchant of Asphodel. He'd rather save this one for a higher damage count, but Luis did consider going after him with the Mind Leech, so Bal decided not to take any chances. On his combat step, both Luis and David get attacked and both take the hit. The scales are starting to tip in Bal's favor. David uses Bal's end step to turn his mirror into my blast zone and add a counter to it. I'm not super thrilled about this. On my turn, I make the mistake of seeing double and thinking David has 2 islands, adding double blue with the carpet. However, later on this turn cycle, I will tap one of my islands to correct this. I transmute Muddled Mixture for a Thassa's Oracle. I would have gotten Fubblethub, but Thassa is an important blocker and on my end step I intend to send David's mirror out, potentially convincing him to destroy all permanents at 1 CMC. The Oracle replaces my Steel Enchantment Devotion. I play the Oracle, look at the top 7 and it's not that amazing. I still fix my next turn's draw, however. Moving to the end step, I try to force David to activate that damn mirror by blinking it. I also tell him that there's a chance Luis might draw land and have his sneak attack fully online, but Bal convinces him to tap my Thassa in order for him to pressure me next turn. David orders 2 activations of the mirror, the first copying Thassa and the second copying Mana Vault. When the trigger is resolved, David taps the Mana Vault mirror to generate 3 mana and then lets it turn into Thassa so that he can tap my commander. My turn ends. On Luis's turn, he does find a land, an Exotic Orchard. This means he is able to cast Sneak Attack and cheat in Medomai, and Luis does just that, attacking me with the Sphinx. He gets an extra turn and the poor guy dies. On his extra turn, Luis cheats Mindless Mass and attacks David with it. He sees a Chrome Mox, a Time Twister, and a mirror. He chooses to take the mirror so that he can copy my commander and start ordering his end of turn triggers in order to keep the creature sneaked in by his enchantment. He does just that and gets to keep his Mindless Mass for the fair price of 3 mana. Not bad. David wastes no time in starting his turn by casting his Time Twister, having nothing useful to do. I think for a second, really wanting to take a rat off the board because I'm seeing Bal take the game. However, I decide to be responsible and try to bounce off the Muse with Cyclonic Rift, hoping that if it gets countered, it goes back to my library and helps me deal with the rats. Things go sideways when David reveals that not only did he draw counter magic, but its delay, sending my plans all the way to the blind eternities. The Time Twister resolves. David plays Mox Diamond and pitches an Ancient Tomb since his life total isn't looking amazing. He then tries to cast a Prophet of Distortion. Because he has a Seedborn Muse in play, I cast Force of Will on the guy, losing a mana drain to it. The blue players come out of their war a little worn and David passes. Bal opens his turn with 2 new Relentless Rats. The joy! He then plays Sol Ring, Lotus Petal, and Mox Diamond while pitching a Wooded Foothills. At this point, we realized I had added an extra blue from Carpet and tapped my untapped island. No harm done. Bal attacks me with 2 rats and David with 1 plus the Grey Merchant, forcing David to block a 6/6 rat with the Muse, while my Venser does the brave thing and uses his body to block another. It's my turn and Bal is pretty much going to win if I don't find an out now. I remove a time counter from the Rift and cast Mystical Tutor for Temporal Manipulation. I add blue with the Carpet, cast Temporal Manipulation, and go to my end step blinking the Oracle. I do not find an Archaeomancer. On my extra turn, things are getting desperate. I remove another time counter from the Rift, add blue from the Carpet, and cast Snapcaster on the Temporal Manipulation to recast it. I look at the top 6 during my end step, regretting not having gotten that Fibblethip just so I can draw rather than look and get no real card advantage from it. It's my third turn. I cast Rift, targeting Jared. Bal Dark Rituals in response and sacrifices 2 rats, one after the other, taking 6 and 5 life from everyone else with his commander. We lose 11 and David dies, taking the carpet and the mirror with him. Man down. Bal then sacrifices another rat and we're dangerously low on life. Jared gets bounced, but Bal decides to put it into his command zone rather than his hand, because otherwise Mind Leash Mass can steal him. I then cast Basalt Monolith and follow it up with Baron Tolerant Archmage, with which I bounce my Snapcaster. I go to my end step and order my triggers, so I bounce Thassa's Oracle first to dig deeper, and then Baron's Draw. Still on my end step, Luis shoots in an Ilarg with Sneak Attack. We're on Luis's turn feeling the Doom Clock. Luis plays Volcanic Island and then a Mox Diamond, 3 out of the Time Twister, discarding Ancient Tomb just like the deceased David. Sneak Attack puts the wonderful Aurelia the War Leader onto the battlefield, and Luis also casts Kenrith, giving his creatures haste and trample. He attacks Bal with everything, triggering Mind Leech Mass and discovering he was keeping a regrowth. He uses it to recover his Ancient Tomb before moving to another combat, attacking Bal with everything once again, and hoping I can interact. On Luis's end step, Aurelia and Ilarg die. Bal casts Jared. I cast the Unsubstantiate I found with Baron to send the spell back. Bal recasts it and has exactly the necessarily cardinal mana to sacrifice a rat and win the game. GG. Thank you for joining us through this match, everyone. Bal's relentless rats exploded in our faces taking this game. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, Stefan, TJ Rapp, Mike Purr, Adjimo, and Iglegal, our stack breakers. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing, or by becoming a patron yourself. If you want to go through other Commander adventures, click one of the videos on the right. If you want to talk with us about our games or other EDH related matters, join us on Discord. Come with us again next week for a new set of Commanders and more decisive plays. See you all then.